Good evening, Love Gospel and brothers and sisters. My name is Brother Al. I'll be speaking on the book of Hosea. First, food for thought. A strong marriage is built on trust and commitment, but trust is broken when one partner is unfaithful. Keep this in mind as we read Hosea. Hosea, whose name means the Lord has saved, ministered to the northern kingdom of Israel, also called Ephraim, after its largest tribe. After the death of Solomon, the united Hebrew kingdom was divided, with the southern kingdom called Judah and the northern kingdom Israel. You see that in 1 Kings chapter 11, 31 through 35. Hosea is a book that involves sin, salvation, judgment, and restoration. Outwardly, the nation is enjoying a time of prosperity and growth, but inwardly, moral corruption and spiritual adultery permeates the people. Hosea had the unenviable responsibility to confront a comfortable culture. God used Hosea and wife Gomer's relationship to illustrate the fact that Israel, the people with whom he had entered into sacred covenant, had broken faith by committing spiritual adultery with false gods. Their actions broke God's heart. The unfaithful wife, chapter 1 through 3. Hosea the prophet was married to an unfaithful wife, yet he continued to love her deeply. Even though she abandoned him and her children for lovers, Hosea provided for her and ultimately brought her back home. But also, it demonstrates God's heart for forgiveness and reconciliation, as Hosea was told to welcome his wife back even when she had been unfaithful to him. You see that in Hosea chapter 3, 1 through 5. The commitment that Hosea displayed to his marriage is remarkable, especially in our day when divorce is so common. Hosea's willingness to keep on loving despite his deep hurt reminds us that marriage is a commitment that is not to be quickly set aside. As a side note, look at Romans 5, 5 through 11. In a comment, in this action is a picture of the unfailing, persistent love of God. Moreover, it is what God does for us through Jesus, who bought us with his own blood. He gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to cleanse for himself a people for his own possession, eager to do good works. See Titus chapter 2, verse 14. We go now to the unfaithful nation. You see that in chapter 4, 1 through 19. God's indictment of sinful Israel, like the other prophets whom God sent to his people, Hosea simply, plainly talked about the sins that call for divine judgment. In unequivocal terms, Hosea announced the Lord brings a charge against the inhabitants of the land, and he went on to spell that charge out. Hosea chapter 4, 1 through 2. There is no truth or mercy or knowledge of God in the land. By swearing and lying, killing and stealing, and committing adultery, they break all restraints with bloodshed upon bloodshed. Haven't we heard this before? When regard for God doesn't cross the mind of a nation on a daily basis, it is not surprising that the Ten Commandments are also completely ignored. But God's affirmed love. We see this in chapter 11 and the blessing in chapter 14. God's love is unshakable. God expresses his boundless love for Israel. From infancy, God has cared for his people, like a parent teaching them to walk, protecting and caring for them. God's love is so deep that whatever the provocation, God simply will not let his people go. It's important to remember that God's love does not fail. The book of Hosea reminds us that in the end, God brings the wanderer back to himself. Ahead there remains a day for Israel when God will heal their backsliding and love them freely, and Israel will grow like the lily. You see that in chapter 14, verse 4 and 5. That powerful love can change sinners today as well, healing us and enabling us to blossom. The major truths of the book are: God suffers when his people are unfaithful to him. God cannot condone sin. And number 3, God will never cease to love his own, and consequently he seeks to win back those who have forsaken him. Coming down to the wire, how does the book of Hosea relate to today? In our society today, many of us unknowingly allow many things to become gods to us. For example, many of us have allowed money, fame, work, or pleasure to become our gods because we concentrate too much on them for our personal identity, meaning, and security. Although no one sets out with the intention of worshiping these things, but by the amount of time we devote to them, these things can grow into gods that ultimately control our minds and thoughts and energy. The only way we can keep these things from turning into gods is by letting the God, our Father, hold the central place in our lives. God will never cease to love his own, and consequently, he seeks to win back those who have forsaken him. You may run out of a lot of things in life, but you will never run out of God's love. Shalom.
Thank you for joining us in this week's Nuggets of Hope. We hope you continue to join us, and we hope that you are blessed by each teaching. You can join us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. God bless you.